When you think of ancient Egypt, you probably picture the Great Pyramids, the golden mask of Tutankhamun, the hieroglyphics carved into tomb walls, a civilization defined by stone, gold, and a deep obsession with the afterlife. But tonight, you step somewhere else, because behind all the monuments and pharaohs, there was another world, a world of powerful drugs, mind-bending rituals, and medical treatments that walked a fine line between healing and horror. Not a land of silent tombs, but of fragrant oils, bitter roots, and whispered spells. You weren't just a builder of empires. You were a healer of bodies and a traveler of altered states. You lived in a time where magic and medicine were the same thing, where a prayer was as vital as a scalpel, and the gods themselves handed down the recipes. In your scrolls, like the great Ebers papyrus, you recorded hundreds of cures: blue lotus steeped in wine to feel the divine, mandrake and wild lettuce to ease pain and open dreams, moldy bread and honey to heal infection, even crocodile dung to prevent birth. Tonight we're not walking through temple halls. We're opening your medicine cabinet, and what's inside is stranger, more sacred, and far more human than you could ever imagine. So close your eyes. The air is thick with incense, and your hands reach for the jar, sealed in wax, trembling with memory. This is not just history. This is your pharmacy. So if this strange and sacred world fascinates you, if you'd sip lotus wine by firelight, if you dare to unwrap the remedies hidden beneath gold and silence, then subscribe to our channel for weekly journeys into the forgotten pharmacies of history, because here, every night, you don't just fall asleep, you remember.
You awaken in the cool shadows of a temple courtyard, long before the sun climbs above the limestone walls. The air smells faintly of incense, myrrh, crushed juniper, and old oils, and you hear the soft padding of bare feet against stone. You're not here for worship. You're here for healing. But in this world, the two are inseparable. In ancient Egypt, illness is never just about the body. A fever isn't just a sign of infection. It's a message. Maybe a god has grown displeased with you. Maybe a curse was placed upon your name in secret. Maybe a demon, invisible and silent, has curled up behind your ribs. Medicine here is not merely a science. It is a spiritual event, a divine negotiation. The idea of Ma'at, the sacred balance of the universe, is everything to you. When you are well, it means you are in harmony with that balance. But when you're sick, something is wrong in the invisible fabric of the cosmos. The healing process must therefore begin not with surgery or medicine, but with understanding what divine thread has been pulled out of place. You're led into a chamber painted with faded images of Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of disease and healing. Her eyes burn even from the wall, and you wonder if it was her claws that brought the sickness, or if she's the one who will lift it. Nearby, a priest chants softly, not looking at you, but at a statue, a vessel for a god you hope will intercede. You don't question this. In fact, you expect it, because in your world, doctors are also priests, and priests are also magicians. You sit still, heartbeat slow, as the ritual begins.
You hear words in a language you only half understand, sacred syllables passed down from temple to temple, generation to generation. These aren't medical instructions, they're invocations. The healer priest is awakening the power of Heka, the divine force of magic itself. To you, Heka isn't just a god, it's the underlying force that makes medicine work. Without Heka, a remedy is just a lump of herbs. But with Heka, it becomes a living agent of transformation. The priest isn't simply reciting a spell, He's activating the very forces that keep the world turning. Heka is the breath behind the cure. This is where healing begins. Beside you, another figure arrives, the Swinu, or doctor. He is not a magician, though he too believes in the power of words. His hands are steady, his eyes are focused. You notice a satchel tied at his waist, filled with scrolls and crushed materials. He was trained in a house of life, one of the medical schools housed within temple complexes. His knowledge is precise, methodical, more anatomical than mystical. He studies your eyes, your pulse, your breath. He presses your stomach gently, listens to the pattern of your pain, and compares it against a long memory of cases and cures. He knows which organs sit where. He has read of broken bones and surgical stitching. The Edwin Smith Papyrus, his silent teacher, details 48 types of trauma, from skull fractures to spinal damage. It's an ancient manual of reason and observation, and while the ritual swirls around you, he is anchoring your care in something very real. Yet even he does not work alone. Healing is a collaboration between science, spirit, and spell. The boundaries are porous. If the physical cause remains hidden, then a spiritual one must be sought. If a potion does not work, then perhaps a ritual will. And if the gods are silent, the scribe will consult the scrolls again. You are a patient, but also a participant in a sacred drama, one in which the illness is not just inside you, but around you, in the order of the stars, in the favor of the divine. And slowly, the treatment begins.
You lie back on the reed mat, and a hush falls over the room. It's time for the first stage of treatment, not with knives or ointments, but with words. The swan begins to grind a mixture of herbs and minerals on a flat stone pallet. He adds honey, crushed myrrh, and a chalky red powder from a jar labeled with the symbol of Sekhmet, lion-headed goddess of both plague and healing. His hands move quickly, but with a solemn grace, as though each motion echoes something sacred. At the same time, the priest begins to chant softly. His voice is not loud. It doesn't need to be. The words are like smoke drifting through the chamber. Each syllable is chosen for its vibration, its magic, its rhythm. He calls upon Heka to awaken the ingredients. He speaks to your body, to your liver, your blood, your breath, as though they are separate beings that must be coaxed back into harmony. Above you, the painted ceiling of the temple shows a sky of gold stars and flowing rivers. You stare at it as incense curls past your nose. Kifi, the sacred blend. It's sweet and strange, made from frankincense, raisins, wine, cinnamon, and more. The smoke makes your body feel warm, your thoughts slow. It's not just perfume, it's medicine for the spirit. Then the mixture is applied to your skin. It stings at first, but not painfully. The swan hums something low and steady, matching the priest's rhythm. This is not multitasking, it is layered healing. The remedy is both physical and poetic. The spell guides the substance to its target like an arrow to a wound. And as the treatment continues, the priest raises a small idol, a statue of Bes, the protective dwarf god with lion ears and wild hair. He is a bringer of laughter, a chaser of demons, a friend to mothers and children. His presence here is protective, comic, holy. Your ailment, whatever it was, now has company. You are no longer alone. The gods are listening, and soon they will respond.
The chanting stops. There's a moment of complete stillness. No footsteps, no grinding, no birds outside. The incense smoke hangs in the air like frozen silk. And then the priest turns to you with something small in his hand. A rolled scroll, barely the length of your palm, sealed with wax. It's not medicine in the way you'd think. It's a healing spell, written in cursive hieratic script, infused with meaning and sound.
The priest places it gently beneath your pillow. Its power isn't in the paper, but in the idea, the belief that words have shape, weight, and direction. This is Heka at work. Not superstition, not decoration. Heka was the very force of creation, older than the gods themselves. Every cure must speak through it. Every prayer must echo it. To speak healing was to weave reality into order again. And if your illness was stubborn, if it resisted both ointment and prayer, the healers would not give up. They would escalate the ritual. You'd be led to a side chamber in the temple, dim and warm. A basin of Nile water waits, infused with sacred herbs and petals. As you undress, the priest recites the purification of the four winds, a spell said to cleanse body and soul. The water is poured over your head, slowly, deliberately. It smells like juniper and acacia, sharp and clean. This isn't just hygiene. This is resetting your spiritual alignment, like tuning an instrument before a sacred song. Then comes the amulet selection. A box is brought in, carved wood inlaid with turquoise and lapis lazuli. Inside are dozens of tiny protective charms, ankhs for life, eyes of Horus for protection, scarabs for transformation. Each has been blessed under a full moon or an eclipse during certain planetary alignments. The Soon and the priest consult a calendar. Today is the 8th day of the lunar cycle, sacred to Thoth, the god of wisdom and the moon. They choose a silver scarab, place it against your chest, and bind it there with linen dipped in cedar oil. And then, at last, the diagnosis is spoken. Not in numbers or Latin phrases, but in metaphor. The balance of your ka has shifted. There is dryness in the channels. Heat rises where there should be coolness. A foreign will, not your own, may have taken hold. You nod. You understand. You feel it too. But now, the healing has begun.
You are returned to your cot. It's just straw and linen, but it feels heavier now, as if charged with something old, something sacred. You lie still, the silver scarab pressing against your sternum, and all around you, the house of life continues its rhythm. A young scribe walks past, balancing a tray of pounded herbs. Behind him, 2 apprentices chant in unison as they stir a thick paste over a clay firepot. They're making a wound salve, olive oil, crushed myrrh, and resin mixed with a few drops of sacred ink from a scroll that had been blessed in ceremony. Nothing in this place is done without intention. Nothing is simply medicine. Even how it is prepared changes its meaning. You're told that today, your treatment will begin with cleansing and alignment, not just of the body, but of the spirit's architecture. The healer approaches with a bowl of red ochre mixed in palm wine. Red, in your world, is the color of life and danger, blood, power, and divine wrath. The ochre is sacred to the god Set. It is both poison and shield, depending on the words spoken over it. The priest begins the chant. His voice rises like the Nile in flood season. Let the red sun pass through the sickness. Let it burn the rot and leave only truth behind. You sip the ochre mixture, feeling warmth bloom in your chest. It tastes like metal and spice, strange and ancient. You do not know if it's working. You do not need to. Belief is part of the cure. Later, when the dizziness fades, a woman healer enters, a priestess of Sekhmet. Her eyes are lined in kohl, her fingers stained with henna. She carries a jar carved from alabaster, sealed with wax. With a small knife, she breaks the seal and dips her fingers into the paste inside. She rubs it gently over your temples, your wrists, your throat. The smell is overpowering,
Lotus, frankincense, and pine sap, a sacred blend known only to her order. "This will cool the fire in your blood," she whispers, "and call Sekhmet to see you, but not to strike." Then she places a tiny gold figurine of the lion-headed goddess at your feet. A guardian, a witness, perhaps even a negotiator between your soul and the cosmic balance. And in that moment, something settles. You don't know if it's the herbs, the spell, or the silence that follows. But something inside you is quieter. Not healed, not yet, but heard. By the next morning, your fever has broken, but your training has only begun. You rise early, called by the toll of a bronze bell suspended from a fig tree. The other apprentices already gathered in the courtyard of the House of Life, seated cross-legged on woven mats. Sunlight glints off scroll tubes laid neatly before each of them. Today's lesson isn't one of incantation, it's of anatomy. The master physician, an elder whose fingers tremble with age but not hesitation, unrolls a scroll of the Edwin Smith Papyrus, a sacred medical text older than even the pyramids. His voice is low, steady, deliberate. Fracture of the skull. Press your hand against the temple. If the pulse is absent, the spirit has fled. If the eyes roll back, the ba is disturbed. If blood flows from the ear, prepare for passage. You write each line carefully onto your wax tablet, heart pounding. These words were written over 1,000 years ago, and they still guide hands today. But the master pauses now, not to explain the logic, but to make a sign in the air, a small circle, a prayer. Because even here, even with a surgical text in hand, Heka is required. It's not enough to know the body. You must invoke it, persuade it to stay alive. Your training continues by demonstration. A volunteer lies down, wrapped in linen from the waist down, while a healer gently presses along their ribs. The master whispers as he moves. We read the body as we read the stars. It speaks. We must learn to hear it. You begin to see how knowledge itself is a form of magic, how each tendon, each vein, each gland is described not just in physical terms, but as part of a spiritual system. The liver, the seat of wrath. The heart, the throne of the soul. The lungs, the wings of the Ka flapping gently with each breath. You are not studying organs. You are studying meaning. And later that afternoon, when you were given your first patient, a small boy with a twisted ankle, you do not start with salve or prayer. You start by listening. His breath, his whimpers, the tension in his foot. Then, gently, you place your hand over the swelling and whisper, "Come back into balance. Come back to Maat." The treatment is simple. Bandaging, herbal poultice, a whispered hymn. But as the boy relaxes and smiles through tears, you feel something stir inside you. You're not just learning medicine. You're becoming a keeper of cosmic order.
That evening, you were assigned to assist in the temple clinic, a narrow chamber lit by oil lamps, its walls lined with jars, powders, and bundles of dried herbs bound with red thread. Sick villagers wait outside, some holding amulets, others clutching their children. You're stationed beside the senior healer, a soft-spoken priest of Sekhmet, lion-headed goddess of healing and destruction. Her likeness looms above in a painted relief, eyes fierce, staff in one hand,
Ankh in the other. The healer murmurs, "Not all wounds are visible." The first patient enters, a farmer whose sleep is disturbed by shadows and cries he cannot explain. He claims a spirit is sitting on his chest at night, stealing his breath. You feel a chill rise on your skin. The priest examines him briefly and nods. Possession. From a side shelf he gathers tools, a small clay bowl of incense and resin, a piece of carved sycamore wood, and a narrow scroll. The scroll is a spell of unbinding, a command to unseen forces to release the man. As the incense is lit, the room fills with sweet smoke. The priest chants, "Come forth, O tormentor of sleep. By Sekhmet's fire be seen and silenced." The patient shakes. You see tears in his eyes. But the healing doesn't end there. He's sent home with a balm, frankincense and lotus oil mixed with beeswax, rubbed onto his chest nightly. A dream spell is tucked into his cloak. His caw, the healer says, will find peace again. Later, a woman arrives cradling a baby with a swollen eye. The healer examines the child gently and declares it an infestation of evil eye, envy from a neighbor perhaps, or a wandering spirit attracted by the child's beauty. You are told to prepare coal paste mixed with garlic ash and to trace a protective sigil on the baby's forehead. Medicine treats the symptom, but Heka addresses the cause. Throughout the night, you watch as potions are brewed, sigils are painted, names of power are spoken into clay cups of water. Each action layered, physical, spiritual, symbolic. One man is given moldy barley and honey for a wound, but not before the priest mutters, "This bread is blessed by Hathor, who births joy and silences pain." To a modern eye, it may seem like theater, but here it is the weaving of worlds. You leave the clinic in silence, hands sticky with salve and cedar oil, heart echoing with chants. You know now that in Egypt, medicine is never just treatment. It is ritual. It is language. It is the art of holding someone's soul in place while the body learns to stay.
By now, your linen robes carry the scent of sweet resin, sweat, and crushed herbs. You've worked for weeks in the temple's healing chambers. You've watched people come trembling with sickness and leave with hope. But tonight, everything changes. You're no longer an observer. You're about to lead your first ritual of healing. Alone. A child is brought in by his mother. He's coughing, pale, with heat rising from his tiny body like desert wind. Fever, the kind that takes the breath away by morning if left untouched. You try to stay calm. You recite the steps from memory. Cleanse, diagnose, treat, seal. But your hands tremble. You light the incense too fast. The smoke chokes the small room. The mother looks at you, desperate. You take a deep breath and center yourself. You remember your training. Healing begins with Ma'at, with balance. You place your palm on the boy's forehead. You begin to chant, voice low, steady, rhythmic. The same spell you practiced so many times, now real. Fire of Sekhmet, be gentle. Waters of Heka, flow through this body. Illness be named, and named be gone. You apply a salve of frankincense and white lotus, mashed into honey and dusted with cooling chalk. You stroke the child's arms with fingers dipped in sacred Nile water.
You whisper the names of protective spirits into his ear. And then, you wait. A breeze passes through the slatted wall. The fever does not break, not yet, but the boy's breathing slows. His fingers uncurl. He sleeps. The mother begins to cry, not in grief, but in relief. In that moment, you understand something profound. You are not just a vessel for knowledge. You are a conduit for the sacred. Every chant, every poultice, every whispered name is not just medicine. It is a dialogue between this world and the next, between body and spirit, between human and divine. You write the case into the scroll by flickering lamplight. Fever of unknown source, calmed with lotus and honey, healing delivered through Sekhmet and Heka, outcome, yet unfolding. You sign it not with your name, but with the ancient mark for listener of spirits, because now you are one. The divine pharmacy is more than a room. It's a place where the veil thins, where gods whisper, where illness is not just battled, but understood. And this is only the beginning.
You wake just before sunrise, wrapped in linen, a dream still clinging to your eyelids like mist on the Nile. It was not an ordinary dream. You were floating, weightless, light pouring from your chest, watching stars blink open in the sky like the eyes of gods. You smelled wine, sweetened with lotus. You heard chanting, low and rhythmic, from mouths not your own. And when you reached out, your hands held a flower, its petals glowing with breath, its stem pulsing like a heartbeat. You wake with that dream heavy in your lungs, because today is the day you begin your study of divine consciousness, the sacred art of altering the mind. In the house of life, you've already learned how to treat fever, how to stop bleeding, how to align bones. But now, your teacher leads you beyond medicine for the body. Now, you'll learn how your ancestors traveled the unseen world through plant, potion, and prayer. You are brought to a shaded garden behind the temple. It is quiet, not silent. The bees still buzz, the reeds still sway, but everything feels muffled, as if you've stepped behind a veil. Your instructor, a woman robed in indigo linen, motions to a lotus blooming in the pond. "The flower of Ra," she says. "It opens with the sun, folds with the moon, just like us." She crushes a single petal between her fingers, holds it beneath your nose. The scent is honeyed, damp, and faintly metallic. You inhale, and the world bends. Not violently, not like wine or sickness, but softly. The colors feel thicker, the air warmer. The distance between you and the flower collapses. "Now," she whispers, "you begin to see." She tells you this is the sacred blue lotus, Nymphaea caerulea, used in rituals, dreams, funerals, and festivals. Its name is written in tombs, its shape carved in stone, its image painted into the walls of temples for thousands of years. And it's not just decoration. It's a threshold, a way to soften the mind, open the spirit, and call the gods near. Later, you're given a scroll, faded but fragrant, filled with images, figures reclining, holding cups of lotus-infused wine, priests weaving garlands from its petals, lovers offering the flower to one another during moonlit rites.
It is the bridge between realms, your teacher says. The breath of the gods, the scent of rebirth. You sip the lotus wine at sunset, just a mouthful, and it's enough. You lie back, heart slow, vision blurred like candlelight in water. And in that space between breath and dream, you begin to feel it. The line between your thoughts and the divine, between yourself and the sky, grows soft. And somewhere faintly, the gods begin to sing. When you return to the temple garden the next morning, your mind still echoes from the lotus. There is a calm in your breath, a weighted hum behind your ribs. You haven't just learned about a flower. You've stepped into a tradition older than the gods who watch over you. Today, your teacher shows you something even stranger. A small clay jar, sealed with wax and painted with the face of Bess, the cheerful, dwarf-like guardian spirit who protects households, women, and the wild edges of the world. She breaks the seal and pours the contents into your hand. Tiny reddish-brown seeds. Besasa, she says. You call it Syrian rue. At first, it doesn't seem like much. The seeds have no scent, no glow. They feel dry, plain, like something you'd grind into flour. But your teacher explains that these seeds do not act alone. They are a key, a gatekeeper. On their own, they do little, she says, but when taken with others' sacred plants, they unlock the door. They make the body listen longer, hear deeper. She tells you of the Harmala alkaloids that live inside these seeds. Though your language doesn't name them like we do today, you understand their power through story and experience. The seeds of Besança intensify. They lengthen visions, deepen prayer, make the whisper of the gods roar. Were you, the ancient Egyptians, experimenting with neurochemistry? Did you know how these combinations worked? Or did centuries of careful observation, ritual repetition, and sacred curiosity guide you to powerful pairings we still don't understand? Your scrolls are silent on recipes, but the evidence, from residue in bowls to matching mentions in ritual texts, suggests one thing. You were brewing something far beyond chance. You imagine the combinations. Blue Lotus steeped in sweet red wine, followed by powdered Syrian rue toasted and stirred with honey. Then chanting, long and rhythmic, under the stars. And suddenly, your understanding of medicine begins to shift. This isn't just treatment, it's transformation. These weren't drugs for relief or escape. They were bridges to the realm of gods, to the memory of ancestors, to dreams shaped like truth. You see yourself not as a healer only, but as a navigator of spirit and mind. And just when you think the sacred garden has revealed its deepest secrets, your teacher turns to you with a strange smile. Tonight, she says, we speak of the root that sings. You do not yet understand, but by dusk, you'll know the name, Mandrake.
The room is dark, lit only by an oil lamp carved in the shape of a frog. Outside, the wind rustles the reeds near the canal, and a chorus of frogs sings to the moon. Inside, on a smooth black cloth, your teacher places a bundle, wrapped in linen, smelling of soil and something faintly sweet and sour. She unwraps it carefully. What you see doesn't look like a plant at all. It looks like a person, a tiny one, a root shaped like legs and arms,
and a small head, a doll made by nature, or something more ancient. This, she whispers, is mandrake. The root lies there, oddly human, oddly wrong. Its twisted limbs and earthy skin seem to move ever so slightly in the flicker of the firelight. You feel it. Not fear exactly, but reverence. This is a plant with teeth. Not literal ones, but symbolic ones. A plant with stories that bite. Its name is spoken quietly even among priests. Some say if you pull it from the ground it will scream, loud enough to kill you. Others say it sings, luring you into sleep so deep you may never wake. And yet, here it is, quiet, still. She explains that mandrake, a plant of the nightshade family, is packed with powerful alkaloids. Today we'd call them scopolamine and hyoscyamine, substances that can cause visions, numb pain, or send someone into a trance so deep it borders on death. But to you, the ancient Egyptian, the mandrake is more than chemistry. It is the plant of thresholds, used by lovers to awaken desire, used by healers to ease the unbearable, used by priests to reach the gods in dreams. Your scrolls mention it sparingly, recipes for its use to induce sleep, relieve pain, or help with fertility. One line from the Ebers Papyrus even suggests grinding it into wine before surgeries, a primitive, potent anesthetic. But you suspect there was more. It was never just about curing. The mandrake was used when someone needed to cross from one state to another, from pain to numbness, from wakefulness to sleep, from despair to hope, from life to something else. You crush a piece of dried mandrake between your fingers and inhale, sweet, sharp, almost metallic. A warmth spreads from your nose to your temples, and suddenly the walls shimmer. A man lies on a woven mat, groaning from a spear wound. His arm is swollen, infected, his breath shallow. You, young healer, step forward. Your hand trembles slightly as you offer him a clay cup. Inside, mandrake wine, steeped for hours, blessed with heka, whispered over by 3 priestesses of Sekhmet. He drinks. Slowly, his body loosens, his face softens, his eyes flutter shut. Now you can work. You can cut, stitch, clean, and all the while you chant. Not just to ease pain, but to call down protection, to guide the soul should it slip too far. Because this isn't just surgery. It's a moment between worlds, and you are the one holding the door open.
The next evening, you walk through the incense-thick halls of the temple again. But tonight, there's a different aroma. Not the dreamy sweetness of lotus, not the sharp earth of mandrake. Something sharper, smokier, faintly bitter. A priest of Min, the god of virility and creation, beckons you toward a courtyard where statues rise like silent witnesses under the stars. He carries a basket of thick, leafy stalks. The stems bleed a white, milky sap. Lactuca cereola, he says, wild lettuce. You raise an eyebrow. Lettuce. He smiles. Lettuce that dreams. To us today, wild lettuce sounds like a forgotten salad green, but to you it is both medicine and symbol. It was sacred to Min, always depicted with an exaggerated erection, holding a lettuce stalk high. Why? Because of that strange milky sap, lecticarium, believed to mirror the life-giving essence of the god himself. But this wasn't just about fertility rituals. That milky substance had mild sedative properties, enough to calm pain, ease anxiety, and, when taken in strong enough doses, induce sleep. To the ancient Egyptians, wild lettuce was a paradox, a plant of pleasure and peace, a symbol of sexual power and soothing surrender. You watch as the priest crushes the leaves, mixing them with wine, not for intoxication, but for a ritual bath meant to cleanse the body and prepare the spirit for communion. He offers you a taste. The flavor is sharp, metallic, vegetable. And within moments, a calm seeps into your limbs. The night grows quieter. Even the distant dogs and donkeys seem lulled. And that's when the chanting begins. Dozens of voices rising and falling like the breath of the Nile. You sit cross-legged near the edge of the gathering, feeling the effects wash over you. The blue lotus from nights before, the mandrake still lingering in your dreams. Now the wild lettuce, softening the edges of your mind. They don't crash into one another. They weave. And in that weaving, you start to understand. These aren't drugs. They are tools in a symphony. Each one has its tone, its season, its prayer. And when combined with ritual, with gesture, word, and song, they become something greater than their parts. They become the ritual itself. Later, your teacher finds you staring into the night sky, heart slow, breath easy, mind strangely clear. She says, "You're learning." But before you can respond, she kneels and takes something from her pouch, a folded scrap of linen. Inside, green powder, bitter smelling, sharp. This one you know already, but not as we do. She lets the name settle like a grain of sand on your tongue. Shemshemet. You blink. Cannabis.
Shemshemet. The name tastes foreign and familiar. You've heard whispers of it among merchants, guards, even brewers. But here, in this courtyard, where incense lingers and prayers still hum in the walls, cannabis is not a back-alley leaf. It is a sacred remedy. Your teacher sifts the fine green powder through her fingers, letting it fall like crushed papyrus dust. She mixes it with honey from a sealed jar, thick, resinous. The scent is unmistakable. "Place it here," she says, tapping her belly. Or sometimes, here, she points to her temple. "Never too much." You raise an eyebrow. She smiles. It cools the heat inside. Cannabis in ancient Egypt wasn't a party drug. It was a medicine, and more often than not, a medicine for women. In the Edris Papyrus, cannabis is described as a vaginal suppository combined with honey to soothe inflammation, cool the uterus, and ease pain. The plant was also used in compresses, ground into pastes, or made into washes for eyes swollen with infection. Some records even suggest it was burned as incense during birthing rituals, calming the mother's nerves as she crossed the threshold between worlds. To you, cannabis wasn't about escape. It was about restoration. It was a balancer, used with reverence, never excess. Its effects were known, not fully understood,
but trusted like the gods who gave the green. That night you sleep lightly, lulled by the subtle pull of Shemshemet's touch. Your dreams are calm, but vivid, not wild like mandrake, not divine like lotus, but rooted, centered. You wake with no memory of tossing, no racing thoughts, just breath and warmth and clarity. The priests call it the sacred weed of the Nile. But what's more sacred is what it brings. A cooled body, a balanced mind, a gentler path through pain. Your teacher is already awake when you rise. She's grinding more herbs, mumbling a spell under her breath. You see the scroll beside her, a page from the Edwin Smith papyrus, diagrams of the human body, nerve pathways sketched with astonishing clarity. We prepare, she says. A woman is laboring, her first. You carry the oil, the linen, the cannabis. And for the first time, you realize that this pharmacy of gods and dreams is also rooted in service. Not spectacle, not magic for magic's sake, but care. Earthy, messy, sacred care. Later, while the woman rests, her child finally asleep in her arms, you help clean the tools. Your fingers tremble with fatigue. Your thoughts drift to what's still to be learned. Some medicines, your teacher says, heal the body. She taps your chest. Some awaken the heart. She lifts a jar filled with amber-stained scrolls, and some awaken the world beyond. You look down at your hands, stained with resin, lotus, honey, and ash. You are no longer just an apprentice. You are a translator of medicine and myth, a scribe of the body and the breath, and the story is only beginning.
The next morning, the breeze off the Nile carries something stranger than incense, a scent both sweet and foul, sharp as vinegar, heavy as copper. You follow it to the back of the temple, past the healing pools and herb gardens, to a shaded chamber built low and cool into the stone. Inside, priests are preparing a thick reddish liquid in bowls made of carved alabaster. You've never seen this one before. Besasa, one whispers, the seed of laughter, of vision. You kneel beside the bowl, eyes wide. At the bottom, Syrian rue, a plant whose seeds shimmer like garnets in the light. In our modern world, Paganum harmala is a known MAOI, a monoamine oxidase inhibitor. It's a chemical amplifier. It unlocks the effects of other psychoactive substances, making them stronger, deeper, and far longer lasting. But to you, the apprentice in ancient Egypt, Syrian rue is a spiritual key. The priests grind it by hand, mixing it with oil, wine, and crushed petals of the Blue Lotus. The mixture hums with potential. Your teacher does not speak. She merely presses your hand to the bowl. The god Bes, protector of the home, the odd, and the joyful, is invoked. His wide grin is carved on the walls. The drink is his laughter, his mischief, his protection. The ceremony begins. You are not alone in this ritual. Several apprentices, some younger than you, one clearly frightened, sit in a semicircle. The drink is shared, slow and reverent. The mixture is thick, bitter, floral, earthy. Within minutes, the room shifts, not violently, but with gravity. Colors deepen. The air grows textured. Voices echo strangely. Time slides sideways. But then, something stirs inside. Not fear, not euphoria, but a pull, a sense of ancient memory uncoiling, like a snake warmed by fire.
You begin to see shapes moving on the temple walls, not hallucinations, but echoes. Symbols rearrange themselves. Eyes blink from carved stone. You hear music you cannot place. Flutes, wind, chanting from 1,000 years ago. Your teacher murmurs, Hika awakens now. What you're experiencing is no accident. It's designed. The Blue Lotus calms the body. The Rue opens the door. The chants, the same ones used for generations, direct the journey. Together, they create a ritualized inner voyage. And in this moment, you are not simply altered, you are realigned. You don't know how long you remain like this. Time has become fluid. The stone floor beneath you breathes. You are no longer seated in a room. You are seated in the mind of Egypt itself. When you return, gently, slowly, you are changed. Not radically, but subtly. Your thoughts feel rearranged, your memories sharper, and somewhere deep inside, a door you didn't know was there has been left open. You've passed through Bess's laughter, your teacher says. Few do. You don't reply. You simply nod and press a hand to your chest because you can still feel it. A humming. A softness. A veil lifted.
The following day, your steps feel lighter. Not because you're rested, quite the opposite. Your body aches from kneeling, fasting, sitting in trance. But your mind is tuned like a stringed instrument, humming just slightly above normal thought. And today, your teacher has you harvesting roots, not petals, not seeds, roots. You follow her into the shade of the courtyard wall, where the soil is darker, looser, disturbed only by moonlight and medicinal intention. She kneels, draws a curved bronze blade from her sash, and begins to dig gently, reverently. What she reveals is no ordinary root. It twists like limbs, forks like a man in prayer. It smells like earth and danger. Mandrake. This is not your first time hearing the word. You've seen it referenced in poems, whispered in riddles, even offered in jest between lovers. But in medicine, it is potent and feared. Known for its powerful alkaloids, scopolamine, atropine, hyoscyamine, mandrake can sedate, numb pain, induce visions, or, in excess, kill. To the ancients, its properties seemed too precise to be natural, so stories formed around it, that it screams when pulled, that its cry brings death unless you tie it to a dog and let the poor creature pull it free. You never believed the tales, until now. As you hold one in your palm, it is strangely humanoid, forked like legs, a bulbous head, fingers almost. It looks like it could breathe. Do not mock it, your teacher says, reading your expression. It hears. In the temple, the root is cleaned and shaved, dried, then steeped in wine. You recall lines from the Eber's papyrus, mandrake for pain relief, for inducing sleep during surgeries, or as an aphrodisiac. You've read the erotic songs of the New Kingdom, lovers exchanging mandrake fruit before trysts. But in this room, it is none of those things. It is a bridge between pain and peace, between death and dream. Tonight, a scribe is to undergo a ritual surgery, a tumor in the lower abdomen, swollen and hot. She has refused amputation. Instead, a small team of priest healers will open the swelling, drain the infection, and suture the flesh. The mandrake wine is offered. As the scribe drinks, her hands twitch once, then still. Her breathing slows, her head bows. The priest places a scarabam amulet above her heart. You hold her hand through the ordeal. No screams, no flinching. Only the soft dripping of the wound, the whispered incantations, the rustling of linen soaked in cedar oil. She survives, not because of magic alone, nor medicine alone, but the fusion. Mandrake made it possible. Later that night, after you've scrubbed the blood from the stone tiles, you find a fragment of mandrake root still sitting in the bowl. You pick it up, just for a moment. It's heavy, warmer than expected. It smells like dark earth and something sweeter, almost floral. But beneath that, an edge of something metallic, dangerous. This is no toy, no symbol, no myth. It is the gray area between wisdom and hubris, between healing and harm. And you, the student, must learn where that line is drawn. With care, with courage, with humility.
By now, the shadows have grown long. The scent of mandrake still clings to your fingertips. The air is still, too still. Even the birds have gone quiet, as if they too are observing a line not meant to be crossed. Your teacher beckons you once more. Tonight, she says, is a rite of vision, not for healing, not for a patient, but for you. You follow her into the inner sanctum of the temple, past chambers filled with incense, behind veils embroidered with spells, down steps carved with warnings. The walls glow with torchlight that shimmers over ancient god forms, serpents swallowing stars, eyes weeping fire, gods with lotus-shaped tongues. You are not here to learn. You are here to see. A vessel awaits you in the center of the chamber. Inside, wine steeped with Blue Lotus, Syrian rue, and a pinch of mandrake powder, a mixture forbidden to novices, used only in the most sacred inner circles. Your teacher places a hand on your shoulder. You are not drinking medicine, she says softly. You are drinking the door. And you believe her. The cup is cool against your lips, the taste bitter, floral, iron-rich. Your heartbeat slows, or perhaps the world speeds up. Your limbs feel heavy, your thoughts light. Then the chanting begins. It's not music in the traditional sense, no rhythm, no melody, just long, winding syllables spoken from deep within the chest. Each one a summoning, each one a signal. And then, as if the spell has taken hold, the chamber transforms. The flames stretch and bend, the gods in the walls begin to shift. The hieroglyphs unfurl like snakes, winding around your arms. You feel weightless, yet anchored, grounded, yet ascending. The Blue Lotus washes over you like water, soft, warm, intoxicating. You feel yourself floating. Then the Syrian rue strikes, sharp, clarifying, electric. Colors pulse with unnatural life. The darkness breathes, the fire speaks. And somewhere beneath it all, the mandrake, whispering secrets in a language older than thought. You are no longer in the temple. You are standing on the banks of a celestial Nile. The stars ripple in the sky like reeds in wind. The gods are here, not statues, but real. Thoth appears beside you, his ibis head crowned in moonlight. He writes your thoughts before you think them. He turns and offers you a scroll, its letters glowing, shifting, then fading into your skin.
You see the sun barge of Ra rising from a great lotus, trailing a wake of light. You see Anubis weighing a heart against a feather, but the heart is your own. You are not afraid, only still. You wake to silence. You are lying on soft papyrus mats, a linen blanket draped over you. Your teacher is seated beside you, head bowed in prayer. "How long?" you whisper. 3 hours, she replies, but time travels differently when the gods speak. Your body is sore, as if it's returned from somewhere distant. Your mind is clear, clearer than ever. You understand now. This wasn't a trip. It was a communion. In the days that follow, you feel changed. Your dreams are richer, layered with symbols you now recognize. Your hands tremble less during rituals. Your voice grows steadier during incantations. You've joined an ancient lineage, not just of healers, but of walkers between worlds. You now understand what medicine meant to your people. It was never just about curing disease. It was about restoring balance between this world and the next, about seeing with the eye that does not close, and above all, about remembering this truth. The mind, too, is a sacred ground, and sometimes, to heal it, you must first let it fly.
The day had been long. You'd spent hours under the Nile's sun, hauling stones, weaving papyrus, or offering prayers in the temple's dim, incense-thick air. Maybe your back throbbed, maybe your joints creaked, or maybe, like so many others, you carried quiet, internal aches, grief, hunger, loneliness. In a world without modern comforts or clean breaks from suffering, pain was your constant companion. But it wasn't endured in silence. No, pain had a place in your medical system, a respected one. You might not have had a word for analgesic, but you knew the value of dulling the body's cry. And your healers, skilled in both herbs and hymns, had an arsenal ready for it. They called it easing the fire, or quieting the limbs. And whether that pain came from battle wounds, childbirth, dental abscesses, or the simple fatigue of toil, there was almost always something in the Sunul's satchel or the priest's apothecary chest that might help. And if not help, then at least soften. Your first stop might be the House of Life, the place where physician-priests studied papyri inked with fading recipes passed down across centuries. The Ebers papyrus, nearly 20 meters long and crammed with over 700 remedies, contains some of the oldest written prescriptions for pain management known to humankind. In those scrolls, you'd find crushed herbs, seeds, resins, and deeper things, dark things. Let's begin at the gentler end of the shelf. Wild lettuce, Shemshemet el Balad, you might have called it, grew tall and lean along the Nile's banks. Snapped its stalk, and it would weep a white, milky sap, lactocarium. That sap was bitter, thick, and soothing. It didn't stop you from screaming, but it helped keep the edge of your scream from ringing too sharply. It helped mothers rest, soldiers sleep, and priests focus in long nights of chant. In smaller doses, it might simply calm the nerves. But wild lettuce was not just medicine. To you, this humble plant was sacred. It was linked to Min, the fertility god, often carved with a lettuce stalk in hand and an unmistakable symbol of virility, erect and proud. The milky sap mirrored semen. Ingesting it wasn't just for sedation, it was a ritual of life force renewal. Drinking lettuce wine before temple rituals was to take Min's potency into your own. Science and spirit once again blurred. But pain didn't always yield to such gentleness, and so your gaze would drift across the shelf, to the darker jars, a soft sponge, a blackened root, a clay bottle with a warning etched in forgotten glyphs. Because next,
came the stronger things.
Now imagine you're lying on a woven mat in a low-lit chamber, a faint torch flickering above. The priest-physician stands above you, murmuring incantations. Your leg is shattered, maybe from a fall at the quarry or a fight gone wrong. You're conscious, wide-eyed, trembling. Then, a sponge is pressed gently over your face. At first, it smells earthy, then sweet, then nothing. You've entered the world of the soporific sponge, an ancient anesthetic made from a potent cocktail, crushed mandrake, wild lettuce sap, and the powerful black tar of opium. The opium poppy, called huljil by the Sumerians, the joy plant, made its way to Egypt by trade and trust. You didn't grow it widely, but once it arrived, your physicians adopted it with reverence. Why? Because it worked. Crushed into cakes, dissolved into beer, or burned into fumes, opium became your strongest ally against agony. One prescription in the Ebers Papyrus details mixing poppy juice with milk and honey to soothe a screaming child. It's hard for modern ears to hear, but in your time, when fever could kill and a child's scream often meant the onset of disease, silencing pain felt like mercy. But opium wasn't just for children. After battlefield injuries, ritual scarification, or during dental surgery, opium helped to carry the patient into a sleepy haze where pain flickered like a distant memory. Some accounts even suggest that surgeons used soporific sponges soaked in opium and mandrake wine, pressed against the face to dull the mind before cutting deep. It wasn't perfect, but it was magic enough to survive the knife. And where did you keep these medicines? In jars shaped like poppy heads. Archaeologists later discovered ceramic containers from Cyprus, their bulbous tops mirroring the seed pods of the opium plant. For a long time, people assumed they were perfume jugs, but closer inspection and residue testing revealed the truth. These were the storage vaults of ancient euphoria. It wasn't just healing, it was a chemical prayer. And just like that, you learned a truth every culture eventually does. The line between medicine and addiction is as thin as linen. But you weren't done yet, because some pain wouldn't be dulled with opium alone. And for that, you reached deeper into your sacred cabinet.
Now we shift from the mighty poppy to a quieter companion. Less famous, less feared, but no less sacred. Let's talk about wild lettuce. You wouldn't think of lettuce as medicine, but to you, this was no kitchen salad. This was the plant of Min, the ancient god of virility, standing tall in every relief, forever erect, forever potent. And wild lettuce, with its upright stem and thick white sap, was his botanical mirror. Break its stalk, and it bleeds, slow, milky, and bitter. This sap, lacticarium, was your herbal sedative. It wasn't as strong as mandrake or opium, but it carried a gentle numbing hum, perfect for sleeplessness, grief, or sexual tension. To you, it wasn't just a plant, it was Min's essence distilled. You'd collect the sap, dry it, and mix it with wine or honey. You'd offer it during fertility rituals, hoping to carry the god's potency into your body. In some ceremonies, men consumed it before coupling, believing it would increase their stamina and divine favor. And when the pain wasn't of the body, but of the soul, you turned to hemp. Yes, shemshemet, what we call cannabis. Found in ointments, oils, and occasionally even in incense, hemp was medicine for the inflamed. You used it to ease uterine pain, to soothe fevers, and to treat sore eyes, often mixing it with honey or tree resins. Some claim cannabis pollen was discovered in Ramesses II's tomb. Whether or not that's true, its presence in your medical papyri confirms that it was a valued part of your apothecary. Not recreational, not ecstatic, just deeply practical. And yet, can we really separate sacred from scientific in your world? When a patient inhaled hemp smoke before a ceremony, was it for the lungs, the nerves, or the gods? And for wounds, those ever-bleeding reminders of life's fragility, you turned to a sweet, golden savior. Honey. Sticky, pure, divine. You smeared it over infected gashes, mixing it sometimes with moldy bread. What you didn't know, you were crafting the first primitive antibiotic. The honey sealed the wound, the mold fought the bacteria, and your prayers carried the rest. No microscopes, no petri dishes, just intuition, ritual, and trial over centuries. And all the while, beside every table and every patient, whispered softly, "Speak the name of the god with each application. Let the spell guide the medicine." To you, it was never just a salve. It was a summoning.
Close your eyes and imagine this. You are lying on a mat of woven papyrus, in the cool shadow of a temple wall. Your arm is broken, snapped at the forearm in a chariot accident. The pain pulses through you like a drumbeat. But the healer approaches with a mixture of calm and confidence. No needles, no scalpels, no gas mask, no promise that it won't hurt. Instead, a sponge, drenched in mystery. He places it gently to your mouth and nose. The scent is overpowering. Mandrake, opium, myrrh, maybe even henbane. You breathe in and the world slows down. The drumbeat of pain fades to a distant murmur. Your limbs feel like they're drifting underwater. They call it the soporific sponge, the ancient forerunner of anesthesia. Its recipe was never fixed. It changed with the region, the season, the priest-physician's instincts. But the goal was always the same: to separate your awareness from your agony, to make your body silent enough to survive what came next. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes you woke up mid-cut. Sometimes you didn't wake at all. The Egyptians knew surgery. The Edwin Smith Papyrus, a 3,600-year-old trauma manual, lists dozens of injuries: broken skulls, dislocated jaws, shattered ribs, and how to treat them. Stitch here, apply beer and honey there, splint with linen. It's so pragmatic, so rational, so eerily modern. And yet, alongside these clean notes, there are always spells. You can't splint a bone without invoking Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of plague and healing. Her priests were doctors, yes, but also warriors against the invisible. So when your leg needed amputation, it wasn't just knives and fire. It was a ritual. You were laid down. The air was thick with kefi incense, a fragrant cloud of juniper, cinnamon, honey, and wine. Prayers were chanted in rhythm with your breath. The healer's assistant applied the sponge. Your eyes rolled back. The bone saw began its circular song. The painkillers of the time were blunt instruments. Some were too weak. Some were too strong. Wild lettuce, mandrake, opium, alcohol, and ritual sedation made up a delicate balance of mercy and misjudgment. But to an ancient Egyptian, pain was more than physical. It was spiritual imbalance. And to treat it, you didn't just numb the body. You calmed the ka, the soul's vital energy. You soothed the ba, the personality's flighty bird. You anchored the self back to the world of the living. And in that moment, on the edge of sleep and death, there was only stillness, a sacred, terrifying, reverent quiet.
Let's drift now to the edge of a different threshold, where sacred offering meets chemical sedation, where a flower becomes a gateway to both relief and addiction. The temple doors creak open. Inside, priests are grinding dried petals into powder. This is no common herb. It is the seed pod of the opium poppy. You, an ancient healer, call it hulgil, the joy plant. Imported from far-off lands, handled with reverence, measured with trembling fingers. The opium poppy was never native to Egypt. It likely traveled here from the eastern Mediterranean, carried by traders who whispered its powers. To the untrained eye, it looks innocent, a bulbous pod full of thick, milky latex. But to you, it was everything. A painkiller, a sleeper, a soother of infants and warriors alike. In the Eber's papyrus, it is prescribed to quiet a crying child. A mixture of poppy juice, honey, and breast milk, it says. A mother dips her finger into the cup, presses it to her baby's lips. The child drifts off in silence. To us, that is chilling. To them, it was salvation. But it wasn't just for children. You used it after surgery, during childbirth, to ease the shaking hands of the dying, and sometimes to escape your own suffering. It blurred the edges of fear and let you meet the gods in calm. At festivals, it might be mixed into wine, a sip, a haze, a smile. You walk past the statues of Hathor, goddess of joy and intoxication, and feel the gentle tide of forgetfulness sweep over your limbs. Some believe you even created an early version of anesthesia known as the soporific sponge, soaked in opium, mandrake, and henbane. It was no exact science, but it worked, sometimes. Archaeologists have found Cypriot poppy-shaped vases, small and delicate, long believed to hold perfumed oils. Some now suspect they once cradled this sacred extract. You didn't just understand pain, you respected it. And you feared it. Because pain was not just physical, it was a crack in the harmony of the world. So when the poppy flower bloomed in your hands, it wasn't a plant, it was permission to quiet the screams, to pause the terror, to honor suffering with stillness. And in that stillness, healing could begin.
Not all of your pain relief was as potent or dangerous as opium. Some of it came from far gentler sources, milder plants that whispered rather than roared. And among them, none was stranger or more sacred than wild lettuce. Yes, lettuce. Imagine standing before a shrine to the god Min, he of the towering phallus, fertility, and strength. Carvings of the god show him holding a tall, upright stalk of lettuce, not the leafy kind we find in salads today, but its wild ancestor. Tall, spiny, bitter, and filled with a strange white sap. To you, this milky latex looked like semen, and that was no accident. This visual symbolism made wild lettuce a sacred emblem of virility. But this wasn't just about symbolism. That sap, called lacticarium, had real sedative properties. You knew this, intuitively, experientially. It didn't knock someone out like mandrake or opium might, but it eased the mind. It cooled desire. It softened tension. And perhaps in the hands of a healer priest, it allowed the troubled soul to sleep. In rituals devoted to men, you may have consumed it as a sacred act, drinking a decoction of the leaves, chewing the stalk slowly,
letting the dreaminess creep in, wrapped in incense and chants. This was no casual nibble. It was a sacrament, a physical and spiritual ingestion of divine power. But wild lettuce also had its place in everyday life. It may have helped with headaches, insomnia, muscle cramps. When a woman was in labor, you might steep it into wine and let her sip it slowly between contractions. When an old man could no longer rest at night, you'd offer him lettuce tea, bitter and calming. You had no microscopes, no clinical trials, but you had ritual, you had observation, and above all, you had trust in symbols. Every plant meant something. Every remedy was a metaphor. To chew the stalk of men's lettuce was to drink in his strength. To feel the sedative effects was to believe you'd been blessed by the god himself. And belief, in your world, was more powerful than any dosage. In this strange and sacred overlap of science and myth, wild lettuce became more than a plant. It was the tender cousin of opium, the gentle friend of the sleepless, and the quiet ambassador of men's virile legacy.
Let's leave the gardens of lettuce now and step inside a quieter room, the kind of room where breath is held, where pain hovers like a spirit above the straw bedding, where someone lies still, not in death, but in unbearable pain, and where the ancient Egyptian healers, both wise and desperate, did something extraordinary. They reached for a sponge. Yes, a sponge, soaked not in water, but in a strange brew, a mixture of mandrake root, opium, wild herbs, and sometimes vinegar or wine. This wasn't a bath sponge. This was a soporific sponge, your crude but effective attempt at general anesthesia. You'd hold it carefully, warm it in your hand, then gently press it over the nose and mouth of the patient, letting them breathe in the rising vapors, hoping the gods and the medicine would take hold before the knife did. Surgeons of your time weren't butchers. They were methodical, skilled in ways modern people rarely imagine. The Edwin Smith Papyrus, your surgical text, reads like a trauma manual. Step-by-step diagnoses for broken skulls, dislocated spines, severed tendons. But for many of these procedures, pain would have made healing impossible. So the soporific sponge was born, a fragile invention, part magic, part observation, part absolute necessity. Some Egyptologists believe this sponge technique may have been influenced by or passed down to later Greek physicians, who refined it. But it's entirely possible it began with you. There are hints of it in your texts, moments where instructions advise inhaling vapors or chewing roots to induce sleep before treatment. And always, always, it was accompanied by a spell. You didn't separate drug and chant. You whispered Heka into the fabric of healing. Before applying the sponge, a healer might murmur, "May sleep fall over you like a sacred river. May pain pass from your bones like wind over sand." The words mattered just as much as the substances. Without the invocation, the sponge was just cloth. With it, it was divine intervention. And the sponge wasn't your only method. You also brewed tinctures of mandrake and wine. You chewed poppy sap. You burned herbs in copper bowls and asked the patient to breathe deeply, slowly, until their body relaxed. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes it didn't. But it was never careless. You were experimenting, not recklessly, but reverently. Each breath the patient took was sacred. Each sigh, one step closer to relief. So when we talk about the birth of anesthesia, we should remember the quiet sponge, the trembling hands, the sacred chant rising with the smoke. You weren't just numbing pain. You were protecting dignity. You were guarding life. You were inviting sleep before the blade. Let us end this segment not with the scream of pain silenced by sponge or drug, but with the softest of touches. A healing balm rubbed into the skin, a prayer spoken over a fevered brow, a fragrant oil dripped into an aching ear. Because for all the potent substances you possessed, for all the hallucinogens and anesthetics, you also mastered the gentle art of medicine. One of your most beloved remedies was honey. Golden, viscous, eternal. Honey wasn't just food, it was a sacred medicine. You used it to dress wounds, coat infected throats, and preserve balms. You believed it had divine origins, a gift from the gods, and modern science now agrees. Honey is antibacterial, antifungal, and soothing. You didn't know the word antibiotic, but you knew this golden liquid could save lives. You mixed it with herbs like myrrh, frankincense, and juniper. You created salves that smelled of temples. You treated burns, rashes, and coughs with mixtures that were as spiritual as they were medicinal. When someone coughed uncontrollably, you might crush dried herbs, thyme, anise, or cinnamon bark, and heat them gently in a small dish of honey. The aroma alone could calm the spirit. Then you'd add a few drops of resin or milk, chant a quiet spell, and press it to the tongue. You weren't just treating symptoms, you were restoring balance. Even aromatic oils were part of your pharmacy. Cedar oil was used in embalming, but also in pain relief, inflammation treatment, and relaxation rituals. You would warm the oil in your palms, rub it into sore joints, and murmur words to invoke Sekhmet, the lioness goddess of healing and flame. Her rage cured fevers. Her touch burned away disease. A patient wrapped in scented linen, drowsy from herbs, lulled by chant, would fall into a healing sleep that modern medicine struggles to replicate. For fever, you had many gentle treatments. Cool cloths, poultices of crushed cucumber root, lotus petals, or ground barley. Sometimes you'd place green faience amulets over the heart, believing they would draw the sickness out like a magnet pulling a curse from the blood. And again, the spell. Depart, flame of the bones. Be soothed, sweat of Sekhmet. Rest now beneath Ra's sky. It wasn't the words alone. It was the totality. The patient was not a broken machine to fix. They were a being in disharmony, and you were a guide back to wholeness. You even cared for the soul after death with healing. Ointments rubbed on mummies weren't just for preservation, they were for comforting the spirit. You believed pain could echo into the afterlife, and so you swaddled the dead not only in linen, but in soothing oils to help them rest for eternity. So yes, your medicine could be violent, but it could also be kind, tender, thoughtful. You didn't separate body from spirit, pain from meaning, herb from him. You believed every cure was a ritual, every patient sacred. And maybe, just maybe, that's a lesson worth carrying with us, even now.
You wake to a bitter smell. Not incense, not herbs, something fouler. A healer stands beside your bed, mixing a thick, dark paste in a bowl. You see straw, dried leaves, a few grains, and something else. Something unmistakably from the rear end of an animal. You try to sit up. Is that dung? The healer nods solemnly. It will keep the demons away. Welcome to the Copro Pharmacy.
That's the polite word modern scholars use for what ancient Egyptian doctors knew very well. Sometimes the cure came from excrement. Donkey dung, gazelle dung, dog droppings, even fly dirt, as it was known, had its place. Not hidden, not fringe. These weren't the rejected quack cures on the margins of your society. They were written down, ritualized, and administered with intention. So why? Why smear filth on wounds or insert it as medicine? Because to you, healing wasn't just physical, it was spiritual combat. You believed in demons and evil spirits that could cling to the body and twist the soul. And what's the best way to make something terrifying go away? Disgust it. Rot, stench, decay, these weren't just side effects, they were weapons. Let's take one of your most disturbing prescriptions: birth control using crocodile dung. Women were instructed to mix crocodile excrement with sour milk, natron, or honey, forming a paste. Then insert it into the vagina before intercourse. The idea was physical, a barrier, and metaphysical, a magical shield. In your mind, the crocodile's strength, its power to devour and protect, was now placed at the gate of life. It's horrifying through today's lens, but to you, it was protection, not unlike a spell, not unlike a god. Sometimes the dung may have helped. Modern studies show some manures have natural antibiotic properties thanks to soil microbes. So, as bizarre as it sounds, that smelly poultice might have fought infection. But more often, it was simply a gamble, one rooted in faith, fear, and the limits of early science. Your medical papyri contain other stomach-turning instructions. Dog feces with honey for treating infected wounds. Fly droppings mixed with beer for eye infections. Ashes of dung burned with herbs for magical fumigation. You weren't being careless. You were being creative and courageous. To heal a friend or a child with such materials takes more than belief. It takes hope. These concoctions were not given lightly. They were prepared with chance, administered with care, and always with the watchful eye of a deity. Perhaps Bes, the dwarf god of protection, or Isis, the Great Mother. You believed these substances had the power to shock the body and the spirit back into order. And who are we to say they didn't? After all, what is medicine but something strange that sometimes works?
You sit in front of a polished bronze mirror. The morning light filters through the linen curtains. A servant kneels beside you, mixing a black paste in a tiny dish of stone. You lift your chin. She begins to paint around your eyes. First a thick black line, then a shimmering green above it. It's a sacred ritual, a sign of status, a protective shield. But beneath the grace lies danger. Your beauty was divine. To line the eyes wasn't just fashion, it was devotion. The thick black kohl, it mirrored the eye of Horus, a symbol of protection and healing. It was believed to ward off the evil eye, disease, and desert glare. And the shimmering green, it evoked the eye of Ra and the fertile power of Osiris. Each stroke was not just cosmetic, it was ritual armor. But what was actually in these pigments? That black kohl? Made from galena, a mineral rich with lead sulfide. The green eyeshadow? Malachite, a vibrant green copper carbonate. Beautiful, magical, but also toxic.
Day after day, year after year, you applied lead and copper to your skin, near your eyes, near your mouth, and slowly, silently, they seeped into you. We know now what you could not. Lead damages the nervous system, weakens the kidneys, and poisons the blood. Copper in excess corrodes organs and can trigger violent immune responses. But to you, the brilliance of the gaze was worth the cost. The gods were watching, so you wore their colors. It wasn't just the elite who wore these paints. Laborers on tombs, soldiers before battle, even children, all might have their eyes lined to gain protection. You believed it helped prevent infections, and ironically, you weren't entirely wrong. Modern scientists found that small amounts of lead exposure triggered the production of nitric oxide in the body, an immune response that could fend off eye infections. In your own toxic alchemy, you had discovered something real. But you didn't stop at paint. Your perfumes contained benzoin resin, myrrh, and frankincense, but also additives like bitumen, turpentine, and arsenic salts. These were inhaled in small doses, absorbed through skin, and in time might burn the lungs, scar the liver, or numb the senses. But to you, scent was not indulgence, it was spiritual hygiene. Fragrance pleased the gods. A clean-smelling body was an offering. Your sweat was a curse, your perfumed body a prayer. Your ointments, too, were laced with danger. Skin balms might include goat fat, incense ash, and metallic dust. You used them to treat rashes, bruises, or evil humors. But often, the cure created a new problem. Cracked skin, blindness, nerve tremors. Symptoms no one could trace to the sacred paint or holy balm. You suffered, and you still believed. Because the pain was not punishment, it was proof you'd come close to power. The gods weren't safe, neither were their gifts, but you took them willingly. You wore your colors with pride. You adorned yourself with risk, because in ancient Egypt, beauty was faith, and faith always asks for sacrifice.
You step into the dim corner of the house of life. The priest-physician gestures for silence. Before you lies a bowl filled with an earthy brown powder. It smells faintly of age. You know what it is. Everyone here does. Mummy dust. It's not spoken aloud, but it's used quietly, reverently. A pinch sprinkled into ointment or brewed into a dark tea. The dead used to heal the living. In your world, death was not the end. It was transformation, so it made a strange kind of sense. If a person had been perfectly preserved, wrapped in spellbound linen, touched by embalmers and priests, their body was sacred. Why not use it? Corpse medicine sounds macabre to modern ears, but for you it wasn't horror, it was inheritance. By taking a piece of the dead, you believed you were absorbing their essence, their strength, their divine preparation. Mummies weren't just remnants, they were reservoirs of sacred power. Mummy powder was used in poultices and salves. Sometimes it was burned and inhaled to banish spirits or cleanse illness. In rare cases, dried flesh from a cat or ibis mummy might be ground up and mixed with oils to treat infections or spiritual possession. You didn't consume it lightly. You did it with solemnity, with prayer. The Book of the Dead reminded you that names, bones, and flesh all had spiritual energy. To use a fragment of the dead was to enter a pact. And it didn't stop at humans.
Dead mice were boiled into pastes for toothaches or rubbed on cuts to draw out evil. Lizard's blood might be mixed with milk to treat ear infections. Sometimes, the more unusual the ingredient, the more powerful it was assumed to be. Even bat wings, snake skins, and scorpion tails found their way into ointments for fevers, hallucinations, and madness. You believed the creature's essence could counter the affliction. If the disease was dark, you needed something darker to fight it. In rare, extreme cases, there were rumors of blood rituals. A drop of the patient's own blood mixed into a charm, or spit, or semen, to bind the person to the spell, to anchor the magic. You didn't see this as grotesque. You saw it as complete medicine. The body, mind, spirit, all connected. To a modern eye, it's horrifying. But for you, the dead weren't gone. They were closer to the gods than you were. And if the gods granted healing, then the dead were the bridge. Even the materials used in embalming found second lives. Resins, salts, and oils removed from mummies were sometimes collected and reused in purification ceremonies or to anoint sick children. There was power in anything that had touched the dead. Because in a world ruled by gods of the underworld, what better medicine could there be than something that had already passed through death and remained whole? And so you stood, dust in your hand, whispering words not your own, a healer, a priest, a magician, and a little bit of the dead.
It is morning in the low district. The Nile mist rises in ribbons. The temple shadows are long and quiet. And somewhere, in a humble courtyard, a woman mixes donkey dung into a paste with sour milk. She's not mad. She's a mother. And this, to her, is birth control. Welcome to one of the strangest corners of your ancient pharmacy, the dung apothecary. If the body was the battleground, then anything that could scare the demon, distract the illness, or displease the spirit might be a cure. In your world, animal feces were not filth alone. They were powerfully symbolic. They were disruptive, chaotic, and utterly unholy, which meant they might just be the perfect tool against dark forces. You used donkey dung, goose droppings, lizard waste, and even fly specks, not occasionally, routinely. Donkey dung in poultices to draw infection, goose droppings to treat wounds and abscesses, fly excrement smeared around infected eyes to supposedly distract evil spirits, crocodile dung for prevention, contraceptive barriers, vaginal pastes. It sounds absurd now, but to you it was chemical warfare against the unseen. You didn't know about germs, but you felt the danger of infection. And strangely, in some cases, your instincts weren't completely wrong. Some types of animal dung contain naturally occurring antibiotics from the soil microbes within. You couldn't have known that, but your traditions, by accident or trial, sometimes led you to real biochemical effects. Still, it was a gamble. One wrong move, one cut, and you could end up with tetanus or sepsis. But for many, that was a risk worth taking. You even used human excrement in extreme cases to treat swelling, as a topical repellent for spirit insects, or burned in smoke rituals to cleanse a sick room.
This was no longer medicine in the way we think of it. This was ritual combat, with stink as your sword. And while it may have smelled like desperation, for you it smelled like resistance, a declaration, I will fight this sickness with whatever the gods allow me to touch, even if that thing was dung. You chanted over it, you blessed it, you placed it on the wound and watched for signs. Heat meant the illness was retreating. Stillness meant the spell was working. If it oozed, if it hissed, if the flies stayed away, that too could be read. Medicine was a performance, and dung was a prop of power. There were even recipes involving mixing feces with honey or beer, creating sticky salves thought to seal the evil into the skin where it could not escape. And so you dabbed, stirred, and smeared, believing in your gut that this was not filth, but feral alchemy. The waste of life transformed by intention into the medicine of survival. You would never apologize for these remedies. You knew the risks. You accepted the smell, because for you, life was sacred, and anything, no matter how humble or foul, could be sacred too, if used with the right words, at the right time, under the right God's gaze.
In the cool of the morning, the priestess draws a line beneath her eyes, a stroke of deep black like a coal horizon. It is not just beauty, it is protection, and it is poison. You lived in a world where makeup is medicine and cosmetics are spells. But beneath the shimmer and glamour lies a heavy secret, a pharmacy of metals, minerals, and slow-moving danger. Let's start with what you put on your eyes. The most iconic image of your civilization, the black-lined gaze of a pharaoh or noblewoman, was more than aesthetic. You called it mesdemet, a blend of galena or lead sulfide, ground to powder, mixed with fat, applied as eyeliner. It wasn't vanity. It was vision plus protection. The thick line served several purposes. It reduced glare from the desert sun, like ancient sunglasses. It repelled flies and insects. And most importantly, it mimicked the Eye of Horus, a sacred symbol that repelled evil spirits and illness. But galena is toxic. With daily use, it built up in the body. Damage crept in slowly, to the nerves, to the blood, to the brain. You didn't know about lead poisoning, but you trusted the ritual. Now shift to green eyeshadow, a vibrant hue made from malachite, a copper carbonate mineral. The goddess Hathor was said to wear it, so naturally you did too. You believed the green warded off sickness and symbolized renewal. Children were even painted with it for protection. But copper, in high doses, disrupts cell function. Applied too often, too thick, and for too long, and your skin turned pale, your gut clenched, your thoughts clouded. Still, the green gleamed on temple walls. You were beautiful and sacred. You didn't stop at the eyes. You applied red ochre to cheeks and lips, drawn from iron-rich clay. You whitened skin with chalk, despite its abrasiveness. You scented yourself with myrrh, frankincense, and cinnamon, even if it stung the wounds it covered. You believed in cleanliness, ritual bathing, and perfuming the body before every significant act: love, prayer, death. Even hair had its dangers. You used lime-based depilatory pastes to remove body hair, strong enough to burn. Wigs were powdered with mineral dusts to preserve and perfume them. Some were dyed with lead-based paints to darken or highlight the strands. Every step was sacred, every stroke a prayer, but the toll added up. Behind the dazzling court of Cleopatra, behind the grace of dancers and priestesses, behind the rigid dignity of embalming priests, was a legacy of slow poisoning, a trade-off between charm and chance. To wear the face of a god, you had to risk the slow touch of death. Still, to you these substances weren't just safe, they were empowered. They were mined with intention, ground with prayer, applied with spells whispered from scrolls. To remove them would be to remove protection, to let in demons, to disrespect the gods who wore them first. So you painted yourself each morning, not just to look beautiful, but to become a conduit. Eyes like Horus, skin like Hathor, cheeks like Isis, and spirit armored in pigment. Because in your world, beauty was medicine, and poison was divine.
The room is silent. Only the rustling of linen and the soft drip of resin echo against the stone. You kneel at the side of the embalming table, not to preserve, but to take. Because in this ritual, the dead do not simply depart, they are used. In ancient Egypt, death was sacred. The body was a vessel of power. Even in death, it held energy, soul fragments, lingering vitality, the protection of gods. So when healing failed, you turned to the dead. And thus was born one of the strangest chapters in your medical tradition, corpse medicine. It began subtly. A bit of mummy dust, scraped from a failed embalming, was believed to carry protection, not just because it was flesh, but because it had been preserved, wrapped in ritual, touched by priests, and infused with sacred oils. You believed this powder could be consumed in tonics or used in ointments for wounds, transferring the dead person's protective energy into the living. There are whispers, scrolls that reference the black ash of a preserved king being rubbed into the skin of warriors before battle. Was it superstition? Or a deeper, spiritual logic? And it wasn't just dry powder. Healers sometimes used lizard's blood, thought to heat the body and drive out chills. Paste from dead mice applied to sore throats and coughing children. Fat from crocodiles burned in lamps to purify sick rooms. Even ground-up animal bones, especially from sacred creatures, to strengthen the spine or joints. You saw these not as grotesque, but as transfers of life force. If a creature thrived in the Nile, withstood its dangers, then surely its essence could protect you too. The line between medicine and magic blurred even more with bodily fluids. One scroll describes the use of a drop of blood, from the healer themselves, added to a salve meant to bind a curse. Another describes mixing saliva with myrrh, so that the word of the spell may follow the scent. There are references, brief, fragmented, of semen, sweat, and even menstrual blood being used in protective or fertility charms. Never crass, always sacred, always secret. It is difficult to know how widespread these practices were. Some come from temple scrolls, others from village midwives' notes, hidden between pages on herb doses and childbirth chants. But one thing is certain. To you, the body was never just flesh. It was a channel, a place where the divine could enter and where ritual could manifest in blood and breath. The Greeks and Romans would later mock these rites. Medieval Europe would burn the scrolls. But behind the veil of incense and shadow, you continued to whisper old truths. That healing,
sometimes comes from sacrifice, that power sometimes hides in decay, that the dead are not lost, they are waiting.
You enter the healer's hut, expecting honey, myrrh, maybe some sacred herbs. Instead, they hand you a bowl. Inside, a dark, foul-smelling paste. You hesitate. The healer nods. And so, with trembling hands, you apply a mixture made from animal dung, because in this world, even the grotesque was divine medicine. The ancient Egyptian pharmacy wasn't squeamish. Your healers used copropharmacy, the medical use of feces, not as a joke, but as a deliberate, targeted act of healing. There was a spiritual logic to it. The foulest things could repel demons. Sickness, in your eyes, wasn't just infection. It was possession, a demon clinging to your skin, nesting in your lungs, coiling in your stomach. And what did demons hate? Filth. They were offended by it, and so, ironically, you used it to cleanse. Let's take a closer look at your ingredients. Donkey dung, mixed with oil to treat wounds or snake bites. Fly droppings, crushed into ointments for swollen eyes. Dog feces, fermented and applied to infected cuts. Gazelle pellets, burned as incense to ward off bad spirits in sick rooms. And then, crocodile dung, your most infamous prescription. It was used as contraception. Mixed with sour milk or fermented barley mash, it was inserted as a vaginal plug. The thick, sticky substance was meant to form a barrier. The pungent odor? A divine deterrent. From our modern perspective, it's horrifying, but in your time, it was innovative. Crude, yes, but conceptually, not entirely wrong. Oddly enough, some of it might have worked. Animal dung can contain soil-derived antibiotics, certain bacteria that produce antimicrobial effects, and the high pH of some mixtures could deter infections, even if painfully so. But there were dangers. Tetanus from spores, sepsis from contamination, and chronic inflammation from repeated exposure to toxins. Still, you believed that the gods protected those who submitted to sacred disgust, that the more foul the cure, the stronger its spiritual armor. There was also an element of performance. The healer's theatrics, applying dung with gloved hands, chanting spells of purification, burning sweet incense beside the foul poultice, were meant to shock the illness into leaving. Sickness was a spirit, and spirits could be manipulated, horrified, tricked into fleeing the body. So, you endured it. You let the mixture harden. You whispered prayers, holding your breath, trusting that somewhere in the stink and shadow was healing. Because in your world, there was no line between the sacred and the repulsive. Only the question, will it drive the demon out? One final step remains in this segment. The candlelight flickers against the walls of a modest healing chamber. There are no prayers being whispered this time, no dung, no crushed beetles, no bloodied poultices wrapped in linen. Just a small piece of moldy bread and a bowl of golden honey. Simple. But what happens next borders on miraculous. You're watching a healer tend to a festering wound. They speak no spells. They press no talismans. They just tear a piece of mold-covered bread in half, place it gently against the raw flesh, and drizzle a warm stream of honey over it. Then they bind it. The wound hisses. The patient groans.
and you wait. This wasn't a guess, it was a tradition, repeated for generations. You didn't know the names for the things inside that bread, penicillin or antibacterial molds, but you knew the results. In days, the wound would begin to heal. Redness would retreat, pus would dry, and where pain once throbbed, peace would settle in. To you, it was divine intervention. In reality, it was accidental genius. Let's talk about honey for a moment. To you, it was the food of the gods, sacred, pure, eternal. You buried it with the dead. You offered it in temples. You mixed it into elixirs for everything from sore throats to curses. But honey isn't just symbolic. It's antimicrobial. Modern science shows that honey kills bacteria, draws out moisture from wounds, and helps cells regenerate. You didn't measure that under microscopes. You witnessed it in the healing of burns, gashes, and ulcers. You combined it with things that to us would seem insane. Crushed mouse bones, paste from lizard blood, pulverized copper, soothed by sweet nectar. In the clash of horror and hope, honey was your divine mediator. You also used mold intentionally. Not every bread was sacred, but the oldest, softest loaves, those forgotten in the corners of clay jars, they seemed powerful. Some scribes wrote that old bread contains spirits of healing. To us, that's poetic. To you, it was evidence. The bread became bandages. The bandages became a legacy. A strange one, crude, unpolished, and wrapped in rituals. But beneath it all, real medicine bloomed. This is where your world begins to shimmer with contradiction. You believed in magic. You trusted gods, spells, and sacred geometry. And yet you stumbled upon truths that modern medicine would take thousands of years to rediscover. You were sterilizing wounds without understanding bacteria, creating anesthetics from mandrake and wine, making antibiotics from mold and honey, conducting neurochemical experiments with sacred flowers and psychoactive seeds. You may have wrapped it all in incantations, but underneath was instinct, observation, and a deep respect for the body. So now you lie back. In your memory, the chamber fades. The scent of honey lingers. Your arm is bound in linen. The pain is quiet now. You've survived the worst. And somehow, through mystery and madness, the cure worked. You whisper thanks to Heka, the god of divine energy, of magic, and perhaps of science in disguise.
You are no longer in the embalming hall. The incense has faded. The linen has been folded. And the voices that once echoed in sacred corridors have gone quiet. Now there is only stillness. Only the hush of your own breath, and the sense that something ancient and strange has brushed past your life, like a whisper through a papyrus scroll. You've walked barefoot through a pharmacy where gods and humans shared their secrets, where crocodile dung, copper dust, and sacred lotuses held the power of both poison and prayer, where pain was not just a signal from the body, but a message from the invisible world, demanding to be seen, soothed, understood. And now you return. In this quiet moment, you think of those healers, the ones who sat by flickering oil lamps, measuring powders and muttering spells to the rhythm of the Nile. Some were doctors.
Some were priests. All of them were bridge builders, linking bone and spirit, fever and forgiveness, wound and wonder. They believed with a certainty as steady as stone that healing could never come from flesh alone. It had to be whispered. It had to be dreamed. It had to be guided by divine hands, even if those hands were your own. You think, too, of the pain, of what people endured: burns, tumors, childbirth, infections, and how they sought comfort wherever it might live: a flower floating in wine, a prayer inked beside a remedy, a clump of honey-smeared mold pressed to an angry wound. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes it didn't. But still they tried. And in their trying, they left behind something we're only now beginning to understand: that medicine isn't just what you swallow or smear. It's what you believe. It's the calm in your chest when you trust you are cared for. It's the ritual of being seen, heard, and tended to, whether by hands or gods or time. And now your eyes are heavy. You're back in your own room, far from papyri and poppy fields, but their legacy has followed you, curling into the silence like a wisp of cedar smoke. You feel warm, held, maybe even a little bewitched by the knowledge that long ago someone stood by a river, ground up a wild seed, and offered it to the sick, not out of fear, but out of wonder. Because in the ancient world, healing was never just about survival. It was about returning balance, restoring harmony, bringing your body, your soul, and the stars back into alignment. So now, breathe in. Let the air feel sweet and slow, like honey melting on the tongue. Breathe out. Feel the linen fall across your thoughts, gentle and cooling. You are safe. You are resting in a tradition thousands of years old, one where healing was sacred and sleep was part of the cure. Let your thoughts drift like petals in a sacred river. Let your body soften like papyrus soaking in balm. Let the gods of rest, whoever they are to you, place a cool hand on your forehead and whisper, "Be still. You are home." Good night, traveler. Until next time, sleep well and dream deeper than the tombs.